Hey, good afternoon, everyone. At 4:30 this week for Uncork Switch Channel with the Uncoder, we're here a little bit later than we normally are on a Thursday because we decided to do something fun for the month of August. Right? It's hot, it's summer, and you know what? What goes better on a hot summer day than a nice cold beer? Oh, got my things backwards, right? Ice cold beer. And we were the last time we were up here. I think it was the last time, or one of the last times. We talked about APIs, and we happen to have this. I keep pointing to the wrong side. Happen to have this beer photo up here talking about APIs, and our lovely producers told me that wow, that's an anagram of IPA. So we said, you know what? Let's just continue to mess around with some APIs, talk APIs, and Uncork, and do it with an IPA. So we're going to do a little series, four in a row for the month of August. IPAs, APIs with IPAs. All right. So that's why it's 4:30. I did not feel comfortable cracking a beer at 3 o'clock, but 4:30 we're getting a little bit better. So today's APIs with IPAs session is brought to you by Sixpoint Brewery and the Resin. That's a local Brooklyn beer here. As I'm sitting in Brooklyn today, yeah, maybe we'll bounce around the country. I would love to bounce around the country this month too, but I will be stuck in Brooklyn. But maybe the beers don't have to be. So that being said, we are going to talk about some IPAs. We're just going to pick a random API every single week, and we'll just build against it. You know, and today's for our first session since we're on Twitch. Twitch has an API. I said let's build with Twitch's API. So with that being said, I'm going to start sharing my screen, and we are going to start to build against the Twitch API. All right, I actually don't know if all right, my screen is up. Cool. Now you probably just got that meta thing. All right, cool. So we're just going to mess around with Twitch's API, which you could see. I've got the reference page. And of course, the first thing you do, right, when you find out that somebody has an API, go to their docs and figure out how to get this thing set up. And then within 2 seconds, right, in Uncork, you're rocking and rolling. Before we get started, I should probably take a sip of this beer. Ooh, forgot about that one. That's a good one. It is a double, so I'm going to drink slow during this Twitch. All right. So obviously, the first thing you got to do anytime you go to an API is you got to authenticate, right? So I found in their section, the authentication section, and I'm going to go. They support a few different ones. They support the implicit grant flow. So if you're working from a browser and you still need to do some OAuth, they've got an authorization code flow, which is the one that you've probably seen a lot, where you click on a button, you get taken to like a different website, you log in on that different website, and you get redirected back. For this, we're going to do the client credentials grant flow, which is meant, as it says here, for server-to-server API requests, right? We're not going to be making any requests on behalf of a specific user. It's just going to be on Cork talking to Twitch. So client credentials is the way to do it. And of course, in order to do that, I've got to set up an application. As it says here, your app's registered client. And then I've got to go configure my service. So that's the one or two things that I did before. Everything else it's going to do on the fly here, right, is I set up an app. So I went into Twitch's backend, created an app for my codeless staging environment. I grabbed the client ID. I grabbed the secret, which they don't show anymore. That's one of the reasons I set this up ahead of time, is so you all can't see the client secret. Hold on, I deleted it. But in the interest of security, because Uncork is a security-first organization, I set this up ahead of time, right? Which means I also set up the service on the Uncork side ahead of time. Okay, so gave it to Twitch. Again, when you're setting up the services here, remember that there's going to be two different URLs, right? There's that service protocol and there's that access token protocol, the access token URL. In this case, here's your access token, right? This is where you make the request with your client ID secret and the fact that we're doing the client credentials. That goes to your access token URL. So that's why I've got that one up here. And then you have your API, the service protocol. That's basically what is the API, the URL you're going to be making all these API requests to, right? I personally like it on Cork to make that as long as humanly possible, or not humanly possible, or inhumanly, or let's say, extraterrestrially possible, before you have to change, right? So like most API URLs are all going to start with the same thing, up into a given point, and then will come the endpoint that you're going to call. In the case, many of them are something like v1 or v2 for versioned. I don't know what Helix means. Maybe they use a word-based versioning. So maybe Helix is thinking about Android, right? They used to do dessert-based version numbers for the different versions of Android. There was Android Cupcake, and there was Donut, and there was Eclair, right? C, D, E, and so on and so forth. Maybe this is the whatever the letter of the alphabet, whatever number letter of the alphabet H is. Maybe this is that version. I don't know, but as far as I could tell, every URL started with Helix, so that's my API URL. I dropped in my client, I dropped in my secret. Now, one thing I also did is I checked this box here, right? Send client ID secret in the body instead of the header. Okay, now why did I do that? And why is that even a setting in Uncork? Because it says right here in the next line, the following example shows the parameters in the body. Okay, which means they're telling us to send this in the body, right? Some other OAuth APIs, even though it's a specification and a standard and a framework, people can still take variations of it. So we make sure that we allow you to do it in either the header or the body, depending on what the API you're calling is going to expect. In this case, it's the body. Okay, so I've got my service set up, and it's time to make some calls, of course. So Twitch has got a ton of them. I don't know what all of them do, so I'm going to pick one because we are affiliate now. Just want to drop that in there. Last week 2 weeks ago, because we took last week off to kind of chill and relax after a very hard push for the previous 30 days to get official affiliate status within Twitch. So now you can expect a lot more out of us in terms of what we're doing. Keep an eye out for rebroadcast bits and other things that we're going to start to leverage now that we have that affiliate status with Twitch. Okay, so what I'm going to do is there was a very simple one that I wanted to start with that I saw called the get. Man, are these even alphabetized? Get channel information. Okay, we're going to start with get channel information. Okay. It says a path channel and a broadcaster ID. Cool. So let's hop on over and let's take. So let me just show one other thing I did over here. Obviously created an application ahead of time. Chose the Twitch style, so you can see some Twitch styles, and then I just chose the header module. Other than that, it's a pretty standard Uncork application. And then you'll see I have my header file here. In this case, the headers. This header is shared to this workspace, and I think even to the entire environment. So you're going to get to use that header everywhere, reusing some of those common assets. What's actually interesting to note, and I think I showed this in a previous Twitch, but this header, by default, is actually configured for a different style sheet using called the codeless base, which is all blue and everything like that. We've actually created a child style of that called Twitch, and with a few lines of CSS just to redefine some color variables, we got ourselves a Twitch style sheet. Okay, so I'm going to jump in and let's just do this very simply, and let's just trigger off a plugin and let's start to configure against this API. All right, I'll grab a plugin. Cool, and external, of course, we're going to hit our Twitch service. Fills it out with Helix, and I think if I'm not mistaken, the endpoint I wanted was channels. And there's a parameter called broadcaster ID. It's a get. It's asked for broadcaster ID. And now the question is, what the heck is my broadcaster ID? Or what broadcaster ID do I want? Now, looking through their API, typically the way most things flow is you get everything and then you get a single one, right? I don't see a very generic get channels, like get all channels. That might be a restriction of get channels. Yeah, if I search for get channels, I get nothing. Maybe just a security restriction of Twitch to not just allow you to pull back every channel, or maybe they just don't want someone to build their own Twitch based on their data. I've been talking a lot. I'm gonna take a sip here. I hope somebody else is having a beer with me too. It is IPAs with APIs or APIs with IPAs. I don't even know which one's more important here, APIs or IPAs. They're both great. Okay, cool. So where do I get a broadcaster ID? Honestly, I didn't really know. But that's never stopped me before. Not knowing something is a great prompt to go figure it out, right? So where do I get my broadcaster ID? I don't know. So what did I do here? You see, I got my console open. So what I did, I basically just went to my profile page or Uncork's profile page, and I figured, you know what, there's a good chance that there's some API call that's going to go back and forth between the browser and the server here that's going to have some ID. Because I don't see an ID up here, right? It doesn't say users slash 12345 slash profile. And of course, if I go to our Twitch page, it doesn't say twitch.tv slash 12345. It says twitch.tv slash Uncork. Super nice, great for users, right? So how the heck do I know what my broadcaster ID is? So I'm just going to request. I'm going to refresh here. I'm going to look. All right, a bunch of requests came through. This one jumped out at me. GQL. And actually, there were a few GQLs. So let me just filter down to GQL. So, okay, well, what is GQL? GraphQL. Okay, I don't know if folks are familiar with GraphQL. It is basically a new flavor of APIs, So what we've always been talking about so far in all these Twitches and what most of the internet is based upon, at least in terms of APIs that are publicly consumed, it's all RESTful, right? REST APIs. Um, GraphQL is kind of a next evolution of that, right? It was actually developed at Facebook initially. And if I'm not mistaken, the reason that they developed GraphQL is because there's a ton of data that comes back that Facebook stores, obviously, right? They know all the information about you, they know all the friends that you have, all the photos and videos and check-ins that you've made, they know all your friends. Like obviously they have a godly amount of information about you. So anytime they want to pull back information about you, that could be a lot of information depending on what it is. So maybe all they want to do is show your name, but if you did a typical RESTful call, most of the time you're going to pull back a ton of information that doesn't matter, right? And so they developed GraphQL to help them search the graph, right? Because I don't know if you recall, like they had built a lot of what they were building as the social graph, right? And they're basically building the graph of social life in the world, okay, and all the different connections and the way that one person's relationships spawn this graph of relationships to all these other people, and then those people's relationships and those people's relationships, and so on and so on and so on. So basically, if they wanted to get information about you and then maybe some connection that you have, they wanted a better way to ask for that information, right? So if I actually look at my GraphQL query here, well, this one, I'm not going to try to debug all of Twitch's usage of GraphQL, but it allows you to do more around requesting exactly what you want, putting multiple requests together in a single request, almost like saying, hey, this single API call should call these three functions with these three arguments, expecting these three response parameters, right? So it gives you a lot more control. Not something that's directly available inside of any Uncork's components. But that being said, there are more and more services of Uncork being built in GraphQL, and you can interface with GraphQL using the plugin component. So maybe that's something we should think about for one of these other APIs with IPAs is using GraphQL within Uncork. But I also can think of a few great people in Uncork. We can do a whole session about GraphQL, a whole Twitch about GraphQL. Producers, keep that note for me, please. Maybe a whole GraphQL section. So what did I do, right? I just looked in the network and I said, one of these things probably has an ID for me. Sure enough, I found this one. It's got this user ID. And I said, you know what? Maybe that's my user ID, right? I'm logged in as the broadcaster Uncork. This is the ID for me, which means, you know what? It's probably my broadcaster ID. So let me go over and let me grab that. Okay, cool. So that's it, right? This is my endpoint. This is my request parameter as they told me, send broadcaster ID. Cool. So I'm going to save. I'm going to hit that. And I will server side execute it. I don't have server side execute enabled only, but that is what it is. So I'll execute. Pa! Failed. Client ID is missing. The joys of live building. Okay. Client ID is missing. Well, client ID came from my service. I got a client ID. All right, so where is it missing? Okay, so what do you do, right? So you have a problem. What do? I check my service first and foremost. This client ID was something I set up. Here it is, client ID. I'll jump back to my reference, It's only asking for broadcast ID, so I don't get it. There's my client ID. Here's my broadcaster ID. What am I missing? And you know what? If I look over here, this is another nice thing. Many APIs have this wonderful example request and example response, right? So looking at the example request, it says, okay, here's my get Helix channels broadcast ID equals that. Okay, so this is the exact request I'm making, right? This authorization bearer header, okay, that's what gets set by Uncork. So maybe this is something that folks don't fully understand the mechanics of within Uncork, but when you set up a service, it's going to do whatever the necessary authorization steps are for you. So you're only configuring the final endpoint. Okay, so I only have to configure in my plugin. I only have to configure channels, right? I didn't have to configure the OAuth2 client credentials grant, which effectively what that does is that's going to make a post request to this endpoint with this client ID and secret. I'm going to put it in the body because of this checkbox. That's going to give you back as described here, right? This is what Uncork gets back. This is all again happening on the server, out of your view, for security reasons and for simplicity reasons on your part. It's going to get back this access token. It's going to see it's a type bearer, and it's going to drop that into the bearer token. Great. So that's being taken care of from me on Cork. Oh, look at that though. It also is asking for a client ID header, which also is what they're telling me I'm missing. Cool. All right. So it's saying I need to put my client ID also in the header, which is not something that OAuth requires by default, right? OAuth client credentials says you give me the client ID when you make the token request, and then that's it. Your token is implied that it was a valid client ID and a valid secret, and depending on how the system runs, they may also have some kind of relationship between the two and know specifically that token. They definitely know that token is coming from you, right? But for whatever reason, it's saying I need to pass client ID in the header too, okay? Because this -h under a curl request means in the header. Okay, so how the heck do I do that? Well, fortunately, check this out. Request headers in my service. So I can ask for credit. Request headers will get added to every request made with this service. This does not include request for authorization, right? Because that's already handled by the defined interaction between the server and you. So I'm going to say header name is client ID, and then client IDs are not very secret, right? That's the client secrets that are secret. Client IDs are they're client IDs. So we can show that one. So if we grab that, and so now this is basically saying, hey, every time you make a request to an endpoint, send this and this header and this as the value. All right, so if I come back here, I save it again, I come back over here, and well, I didn't put anything in my output, I didn't persist anything, but there it is, right? Okay, cool. So the Uncoder on Twitch, broadcast ID, login, name, it didn't say broadcaster password, broadcaster name, login, game ID, game name, and title. So there it is. Cool. So we're talking to Twitch now. What else can we do? I don't know. What else should we do? What else we got down here? Get game analytics. Gets a URL. The game developer needs to download analytics, and I don't want to download anything. All right. So wait, what did we just do? We did get channel and get channel editors, get channel emotes, get all the emotes that is. Ooh. All right. Hold on. Let's see. Oh wait, do we have any emotes set up? I don't know. Do we have any emotes? I know we were talking about setting that up. Do we have any emotes? Let's check with our producers. Do we have any emotes set up yet for our Twitch channel? If so, that might make for a fun API. If not, let's continue to look down. I don't know. Does anyone have any ideas? Anyone in the chat have any ideas? What endpoint we should hit? Give me some help here. Get user chat color. That's a new one. Get clips. What about videos? What about like streams, right? Can I just get a list of the streams that I've put? Top 10 games. This is search docs. Stream. Get channel. Update channel stream. Get channel stream schedule. All right, why don't we check this out? Let's just flip it. This is super easy. I just switch to schedule, flip it, come back, execute, and where's my plugin? Wait, hold on. Let me make sure. What is this? Get church schedule, broadcaster ID, optional ID, start time, UTC offset, forward pagination, helix, schedule. Broadcaster ID is the same. So I'll come back down here, schedule, broadcaster ID. And you know what? Let me just do a quick calc because I'm tired of the debugger. Because obviously you all know you need to. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'll do something even better. I'm going to do a decision here, and I'm going to take in the plug. I'm going to alias it as P, and I'm going to do exact, and I'm even just going to watch that plugin, and then I'm going to use my, which is not available to me right now because I did not, enable server-side execute only. This is good, forcing good practices. I want to use a setting that's only available for API modules. Therefore, it's only available if I have the server-side execution, which is where APIs execute, enabled. So now when I come back into my decision here and I drop it in and I watch my plugin, and it's going to be exact, and I want it to be out. And now I should be able to get SSE response body value equals P. All right, so what that should do now is response. Execution error. All right, now schedule is not found. Oh, we don't have a schedule set up. All right, put it on the list. We need a schedule. All right, so we got no schedule. What else can we do with this endpoint? Streams. What else do we got for streams? Update. We can update this schedule. Stream subscriptions. What about like subscribers? Channel subscriptions. Ooh, channel update. I don't want to update our subscription. User subscriptions, stream subscriptions. The streamers should send a notification. Oh, I want to get into events. I wanted to really get into events, but in the interest of time, I don't want to do that. You know what? We've got a few minutes. No, I'm not going to even go down that road. What else can we do here? Channel. I'm sorry, get channel editors. What does that do? Channels editors. This is easy. All of their endpoints just have this broadcaster ID. I just got to swap stuff. And isn't that kind of cool though? Like, I mean, obviously, a lot of folks use Postman as a great way to test APIs, but like, I don't know. This is a pretty incorrect either author. This is a pretty easy way for me to test APIs, right? Just throw in, swap out these. Okay, cool. All right, all right. Here's a fun one. Required scope channel read editors, right? So what happened here? I got incorrect user authorization, right? Because when I set my service up, you'll see down here in my Twitch, I didn't put any scopes in, okay? And so when you're doing like OAuth, scopes are typically, again, when you're doing those like authorization code flows, the ones where you click a button, you go to some other website, you log in and you come back. You know how normally when you do that, underneath like your email and your password, your name and your face, whatever they want to indicate that like, hey, you're logging in as you or whoever, it says this app is requesting access to do X, Y, and Z. Well, so that's defined by the scopes, right? So this is something you can add into your API authentication and say, in order to be able to hit certain endpoints, you need to request permission, right? It wouldn't be that cool if every time you logged in with Facebook or Google or Apple, it automatically just gave that website that you're logging into access to everything that you have under the sun, right? It's better that you log in, you only get access to the things you want to give them access to, right? And that could be, a very small list that they request, only what they need, right? And a lot of applications I see, they say, hey, if you request something that you're not doing anything with, we won't even approve your application for, any connectivity, right? So you always want to only make sure you're doing something with what you ask for, and you're actually giving your end user value by asking for their permission. Like if you say, hey, give me access to your entire friends list in a given application, when you log in via that application, and then you're not giving them any value in their application using their friends list, all you're doing is harvesting that information for your own personal gain, like you're not that's not cool, right? Of course. So if you're going to ask for a scope, you better be doing something with that scope, right? And that's a great way for APIs to control who can call which endpoint. And it's also a great way to, make sure that the users are seeing. And then sometimes they even allow you to, like, you probably have seen, you can X certain things out. Like, okay, no, I don't want to give you access to, this setting, even though you asked for it. I don't want you to have it because maybe you don't need it, or maybe I don't care about whatever feature you're going to do with it, right? So scopes are important for that, and really allowing you to fine tune the types of things that someone's going to be able to do with the API. So that being said, what I should be able to do here is just drop a scope in, right? So my require scope is channel read editors, okay? So if I jump back into my configuration and I just add channel read editors in my scope and I save changes, and I didn't get, oh, I thought that was going to give me access. Incorrect user authentication. Because what it should have done is give me that scope inside of, oh, you know what? It probably, maybe sometimes scopes are not super common with client credentials. They're often more for authorization, but maybe they're incorrect user authentication. Let's start this from scratch. Let me just try a fresh test. All right. Well, I'm still blocked. But hey, we got to talk a little bit about scopes, even though that scope change didn't do the trick. And we only got a few minutes left here, so I won't totally debug that. But I will double check that they're also not going to ask me for scopes up here. They're not asking me for scopes up there. So that's that. Okay. So auth user token required. So maybe this is a user token. So this might be the catch here. An auth user token. I'm again using client credential grant for those specific server-to-server communications. So this is actually, by doing OAuth user, that means that my token is with a specific user. So I'll use the last few minutes just to kind of talk about maybe, my assumption about why it's still not working, right? And that kind of has to do, and here's an example of what it would look like if we had went the route of authorization code flow, where you put those scopes in, right? And you're told what scopes that you have access to. Okay. What's important about this too is, or one of the main differences between the two is, a lot of times applications are going to build permissions against the given user, right? So let's take the example of Gmail, right? If I'm going to, I don't necessarily want a server to be able to talk to Gmail server and pull back my emails, right? It wouldn't be very cool if Uncoder maybe just decided to go pull all my emails, if they were able to get an API token from Gmail and just go pull all my emails. Look, and of course, with different contracts, different companies can look at different things, right? So check that out. But like, that's not typically something that you want. You don't want the server to be able to have access to everybody's thing, right? I think if you're building a Google Calendar or Gmail integration, even if it wasn't like a given company trying to do it, like if I were to log into an application, Gmail or Google needs to know who I am so that they can ensure that I'm only seeing my calendar. I'm only seeing the calendars of people that have shared their calendar with me, right? And my settings are respected across the board. It wouldn't be great if I logged in as me and all of a sudden I got somebody else's calendar back because it was a system user talking. And that's where scopes, that's why scopes come in a lot more with authorization code flow, is because they're going to be then applied to your data and the data that you have access to independent of API utilization. So that's that. So unfortunately, we only got through one call where I did show that we can pull back a channel's information, and just to tack it off, let's just channels. I think that was all the API was, right? It was channels edit, and that's basically all it is. So that's a wrap on, in terms of the first API with IPAs. I gotta figure out why it always does that sometimes, right? But that's not, again, not for this episode. So Anyway, thank you very much. It's after 5 o'clock. I can feel a little bit better about taking this sip. For all of you who are not on Eastern time zone, remember the age-old phrase: "It's 5 o'clock somewhere," because it is 5 o'clock here. Thank you for joining the first, APIs, APIs with IPAs. I got it right at that time. Thank you for joining the first APIs with IPAs. If you have any recommendations or you want to see a specific API on one of these episodes, or a specific beer for that matter, let us know. Hit us up on Twitch or Twitter or LinkedIn. Find us, suggest to us what APIs we should use, what IPAs we should drink as we're doing it. And we're just going to continue doing this for the next month, have a little fun, and cool off this summer. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you next week when we crack another one. Ciao.